And we're live. It is Sunday, April 18th, 2021, 5:01 p.m.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
We have, first of all, my heartfelt congratulations to the members of the audience who saw through my sneaky
Oh,
hint and guessed the
Even KK guessed it.
the mystery guest. Yeah, I just want to say I have never outed Jim Comey's Twitter feed. So for those of you who thought it was Jim Comey, um, uh, uh, that is not correct. Ashley Feinberg used my metadata to out Jim Comey, but I was not part of that except inadvertently. Um, I have outed exactly two Twitter feeds. One was Lisa Page's, and that was because when Lisa started tweeting, there was an immediate questions raised about whether that was authentically her Twitter feed, and I publicly vouched for it and announced that it was, and uh, um, tweeted a picture of me and Lisa by way of confirmation. The other was the NatSec Hobbyist Twitter feed, which I recognized because it started DMing me, and it sounded just like Rachel, who, it was so unambiguously Rachel that after a few DMs, I just DM'd her, "Is this Rachel Vinman?" And she's like, "Yeah." So a few weeks later, when with her permission, I announced that the feed was Rachel Finman's. So for those of you who remembered that and therefore figured out
I'm
that
impressed.
Rachel was the mystery guest today, hats off. Rachel Vinman, we are not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to have you on the show. So
Okay,
welcome.
thank you. This actually works well because in my house, our daughter says Alex is in charge of fun, and I'm in charge of safety and basically everything else. So I am not fun. No one in my house thinks I'm fun, except maybe Ace, our dog, the puppy. He seems to like me a lot, but I'm not the fun one.
It's okay. We have all been banned from fun for the last year.
Mm.
We're getting back to the point that we may be allowed to have fun again. We've decided we're not going to change the name of the show when fun is once more allowed. It's going to be weird to say we're not allowed to have fun anymore when we are. Maybe we'll have to say we are allowed to have fun again, but in addition to fun, but that doesn't sound
Sure.
like a good name for the show.
Yeah, it's long. It's a bit cumbersome.
It's cumbersome. In any event, we don't have to deal with this question yet because we are still not allowed to have fun anymore. But what a pleasure to welcome you. And we've
Thank
actually
you.
never met before.
No. Just we almost came to a book launch party for you that Molly John Fast was having, and she invited us, and then we were advised not to come, and I was super sad because I really wanted to meet you. This was a
That was the
long time
last
ago.
time. It was the last time I saw Kate.
Okay,
Was
I
that
would
book
I
party?
would have met you too. That would have
Mhm.
been awesome. Bummer.
Yeah, I was really sad about it. But anyway, and then there was a global pandemic. Maybe you guys heard. So things, we haven't really met a lot of people.
So I wanted to ask. I've been wanting to ask you this question for a long time.
Okay.
You, of all of the people who have been savagely attacked by Trump and his minions, the you are the only spouse of those people, that group of people, who has kind of emerged as a public figure in her own right. We don't hear from, you know, I don't know. I suppose we've heard a bit from Patrice Comey, but mostly the 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 spouses of people who've been sort of involuntarily made into public figures by Donald Trump have managed to, not be big parts of the conversation. I suppose the only other one is Jill McCabe, who of course was the subject of very unpleasant.
Indeed.
But you have been very out there, very combative, and have been, not in any way keeping your head down, both on Alex's behalf, but also just as a commentator who has things to say. So I'm interested in your in how you thought that through, and like at what point did you decide, okay, if you're gonna attack my husband, I'm gonna rip your eyes out.
You want to do this one into a
I want to just raise the issue of like, you're not doing much to convince me, Rachel, that like Alex is not simply like sitting on your shoulders and you're like in a trench coat.
Yeah.
And he's just like popping his head. I'm like,
It's creeping me out a little bit. But...
person.
strong opinions, and I would not be in the way of her voicing those opinions. I don't have a death wish.
My decision to speak out, I spoke out on Twitter. I was active on Twitter. I had an account, and then I closed it when he first testified, the closer testimony. And then I developed my NatSec hobbyist, which Alex always is like, is it NatSec hobbyist or NatSec dilettante? And that's his favorite joke. He's so charming. But what happened to him happened to all of us, happened to our entire family. And actually not just, Alex and our daughter and me, but also to, his brother, Eugene, and Cindy and their children. And they just live a few doors down. So it happened to all of us. And I just felt like I could speak, and I wanted to also give, that perspective. So of course, my big event that I did was the Vote Vets Lincoln Project ad. And then, through that, I had the opportunity to do the CNN interview with Breonna Keeler. So I think those things were really what kind of put me out there. And, but I wanted to tell the story of what the Trump administration, how they affected us, and, the impact it had, because I think it was not a compelling story, but a story that needed to be told. Like, what happened to these people behind the scenes? I mean, what happened to these people in their real lives, and what, how did it impact everyone? Because it's still impacting us. I mean, it's still like, we're still, Alex, has a book coming out. We're still waiting for the government to finish the review. And, there's just all these little bitty steps along the way. It's never, over the way we want it to be. And that was the part that, especially before the election, though, that was what I wanted to tell. I wanted to tell the story of what happened and why I thought it was what I thought people should know. It wasn't just him. It was everything in our life was upended. All our plans, everything was taken away from us.
And Rachel, if I may, I would just add that. Okay, I'll say something.
No.
Well, I think, I don't know. I would say that us Vindmans, we are fighters. We don't just we're not going to just take it, especially if there was a justice morality component to it. We're going to stand up for what we think is right. Something that we tried to instill in our daughter, Ellie. She's 10. It's something that's important to our family. And I think we believed we were treated unjustly, and we were going to just take it silently and kind of slink off into ignominy or something of that nature. We were going to, we were put in a position of becoming public figures, and we were going to use that platform to advocate for what we thought was right.
So, when you say it's not over, what is the part that, are there still security issues? Is it like, what are the parts of it that have passed, and what are the parts of it that haven't passed?
Probably the security issues have mostly passed. I'm concerned whenever life opens back up, that especially as I see, I'm from Oklahoma. Those of you who didn't see my tweet the other day. And there was a big rally or something. I don't know what it was, some production this weekend. And Lieutenant General, I'm going to call him Lieutenant General Flynn. He's not a general, and there's a difference. There's an extra star, and that star is meaningful. So retired Lieutenant General Flynn, is still going on and on about that Trump isn't president. I mean, just yesterday. So continuing to radicalize. And I said to Alex, what if this was an imam? What if this was in a mosque? We would treat this as, a crazy radicalization, but it's okay because it's in a church. So no one, people don't have the same objections, but it continues to be, we continue to litigate the Trump presidency, the election, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely concerned. We still get letters. I mean, not as many, but we try to mitigate that as much as possible. And, I am concerned if the government ever approves his book. I mean, it's in the process, it's fine. But, if once that happens and it's published, I'm concerned about if he does a book talk or is out there, what kind of crazies. And, so those are things that I think I'll always have. I think that's just, going to be there for a very long time. But the stuff that's passed, I mean, we made our, peace with, with ending his military career. And I think you and I kind of touched on that a little bit, but at one point, simply about, it was really hard, for something that, we, as a military spouse, you devote your life to service too. You can get jobs wherever you go, but you go where they go, and you
do not understand that how much military spouses give up in terms of their own professional opportunities just because of the mobility and also the locations. I mean, you guys are in the DC area, but right now, but that's not, where you guys have been deployed all over the place. And, when you're, it is the lost professional opportunities associated with being a military spouse for somebody who's career military anyway, are immense. And when you cut a military career short over a political issue, you are, among other things, cutting short the professional benefits that are supposed to accrue to a couple, not just an individual.
Absolutely.
And that stuff is not remediable.
Wait, could I just conclude the last?
Are you the
yes, and then I'm kicking you out and letting.
I will kick him out.
Questions.
You asked about,
is this what is still going on? We're frankly still in the midst of a transition. We're trying to figure out what we want to do with the rest of our lives. I might be conducting my doctoral studies, but we don't have basic questions settled about where we want to live. What is it that I want to do with my life? Do I want to be an academic? Do I want to be a think tanker? Do I want to go into the private sector? These are not decisions that just impact me. These are decisions that impact our entire life and our extended family. And these were all the consequence of a series of events that unfolded a
Yeah.
year and a half ago, or my departure from the military less than a year ago. And Rachel and I have been managing all these issues together. I've dragged her all around the world. We at one point moved 11 times in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if some of that was we had little choice in where we were going to go. Now she has as much say, if not greater say, about our future, and I want to make sure that I guess she gets those dividends on her investment. So we're still in the midst of this. We'll see what ends up happening with probably a very, very intensive public period emerging once the book comes out, and see where that takes us.
Okay. Bye.
AirPod.
I'll see you in a minute. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's all accurate. I mean, it's and also a military retirement is planned, many years. There's lots of steps you have to take and lots of things you have to do. And the aforementioned Lieutenant General Flynn, his brother Charlie Flynn, who just got his 4th star, was kind enough to facilitate Alex's retirement at breakneck speed, and which was bittersweet. I still remember the day he sat in the corner and read, his everything, and he just said, they really want to be gone. I mean, it usually would take, months and months to get these orders, and he had them in about 24 hours. And that was really, it was really hard. And I think, in dealing, and I'm not suggesting that anything with this book review is taking an inordinate longer than it should. But I will say that in dealing with it for the past week, it brought up all those emotions that we had last summer of just feeling powerless and feeling like, our life, everything was in someone else's hands. And I still don't think the military, most people, I don't think the senior leadership were not malicious, but nor did they would just say things like, oh, we're going to take care of you. But, then there are questions that they should have asked, and they knew the questions to ask, and they didn't ask those questions just to have that layer of, plausible deniability.
So
Yeah.
I was, as Rachel knows, but the audience doesn't, I was on the phone with you guys almost every day
Yeah.
in that period of time, because I was trying to help Alex think through, what are the next steps that...
And thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
It was very scary.
I have to say, I was stunned at how fast. I've watched a lot of, officers retire. I've never seen paperwork go through like that. I mean, it was literally a 24-hour.
Yeah.
The paperwork was due, what was it, end of July or end of June? And, Alex was expecting, like, all right, you submit it and then you have a few weeks of processing.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like that.
Usually even takes them like a very long time to even like approve it, except right. So it was not just that, but they even gave him a date, and so they expedited everything extremely quickly. And there were lovely people along the way, like just helping with those steps. And so on one hand, you felt like, oh wait, they can't wait to get rid of us. But other people, many civilians who were like, what can we do? How can we help you? And we're very kind. So and I mean, I've lightened up a little bit. The Secretary of the Army is a new secretary, but I've lightened up on General McConville, who is Chief of Staff for the Army, and General Milley. But my feelings remain the same. I just don't tag them in tweets all the time.
Well, okay, go ahead, Ben.
No, please.
So it's interesting what Alex said before he left and what you kind of said and what it sounds it actually strikes me in some ways that I've never really made the comparison before, as like, to a certain extent, a life in academia and an academic life is really typically very difficult in the same way if you have one spouse in like in the academy, and the other just kind of having to have a career that will be able to go
Yeah.
to the middle of Iowa, to like to Washington State, to like
Right.
back to Boston, right? Like if like things change, there's a little bit, it's a little obviously different and like less regular than it is in the military and frequent. But it's just kind of, it's interesting. There seems to be like a bunch of different sets of traumas. Like one is the publicness of all of this, and obviously just kind of the betrayal from your government and from like even like coworkers that you know thought you trusted. But then there's also the rug being ripped out from underneath you in terms of kind of the plan that you had for what you were going to do. Is any part of you kind of excited about like kind of like the, well, we can make our own rules now, we can go where we want to go, like everything is on the table type of feeling?
Absolutely. I mean, when we first got married, we moved to Germany like almost straight away. And then there was lots of moving, and every time I didn't want to move, and I was, always worried about it. But then, I kind of started to embrace it. And this is probably our biggest adventure so far, although Moscow was a pretty big adventure. But, this is a time, there are a lot of possibilities. I mean, that can be good or bad because you can have a lot of options, and then that's scary. But no, it is very exciting. I guess that's why I just kind of want to be done with the government and move on and say, okay, let's finish our breakup, and, and we can move on. And that's, what I hope to do. But I am excited. I mean, I think that, in life, nothing happens the way you plan. I mean, nothing's ever happened the way we plan, but it can be, a great opportunity. The opportunity is what you make it. So I know that's really cliche and silly, but, but it's true also. There's just a lot of truth in that. Like, life, wherever it takes you, you have the opportunity to go and do good things. And I always say, we did lose a daughter when she was just a week old, and that experience reminded me that if you're here and you wake up every day, you have a chance to do something good, and it's an honor to your family, to your loved ones, to whoever, if you can go out and make a difference with the life that you have in every day. So for that reason, I think it's just finding where's the place where, we can be most effective and find our place, but also find happiness. You need to, try to find happiness and contentment in that space also.
Yeah, totally.
So tell us about your background. You're from Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
What is your story, particularly before Alex?
Well, I studied education, elementary and early childhood education. And then when I was 24, I moved to Israel and worked for an NGO and lived there for 3 years.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I lived there for 3 years, and I worked with I worked with people in Gaza and the West Bank, and I mostly lived in Jerusalem. But and then I had this is kind of a random thing. When I say it, it sounds silly, but so the FAA. So I moved back to the U.S. I moved back to Oklahoma, and the FAA is based in they have a large training center in Oklahoma City. The headquarters, of course, in D.C. But I decided I wanted to work for the FAA, and I wanted to work in flight attendant, be like the regulatory, section for flight attendants. And I don't really know why I had this idea, but I just did. So I was working as a flight attendant, and then Alex and I met, and I was working to get some experience so that I could get this job with the FAA. So that was my thing. And I had some language ability. So even after 9/11, it was easy to get a job as a flight attendant. And then we went on one date, and we decided we clicked. So we went on one date in New York City, and then he moved across country to Fort Lewis, Washington. So our second date was in Fort Lewis, or in Washington State.
Shut up.
Is,
He moved across the country. He didn't like come and visit. He moved across the country.
Well, I could fly anywhere. So I guess he was like, okay, cool, this works. And I will say that we went on one date on a Saturday night. And then he left, I think, Monday to go to drive cross country. And he didn't call me for almost a week. So I wasn't sure, really what was going on. But all's well that ends well. So here we are.
Wow. That's awesome.
He was busy. He was driving with his parents or something. That's the story, but I don't know.
Wow.
And you live a few doors down from his identical twin brother who nobody except you guys can tell apart.
Yes.
I mean, I can't tell their voices apart. They look
really?
identical. No, I can't. I mean, I really can't tell them apart. And I got to tell you, I've vetted this position with several people who are all like, yeah, we all fake it.
Mm-hmm. That's funny. It's very easy for me to tell them apart, and I can tell their voices pretty easily. Although when they used to, they worked at the Pentagon together, and then Alex wanted the job at the NSC for a long time, and so he, worked on this for a very long time to get this job. And then we went on vacation in between the like him finishing the Pentagon and going to the NSC, to the White House. And during that time, Eugene gets this phone call and we're like, hey, do you want to work at the White House? So then they were able to commute. Yes. I mean, it was just bizarre that Alex tries for 5 years and Eugene is just basically offered it randomly. But so they commuted to the Pentagon together, and then they commuted to the White House. So sometimes in the car, it would be a little bit hard for me to tell who was speaking, but that's really the only time. So if it was both of them, I wouldn't, I might be caught a little bit off guard. But all of our children, when they were little, had a hard time, I think, telling them apart as well.
Is there an underlying family beef of like everything's easy for Eugene, and like Alex tries for 5 years and Eugene gets it in one try, or like something, or is that just like something there or not?
No, not really that. Okay. I don't think. Yeah, not necessarily. No, it was just a kind of a bizarre coincidence, and they did literally work across the hall from each other at the White House, at the NSC. Their offices were directly across the hall.
There really should be like a movie where like they walk out of like the office together and look at each other and like walk down the hall.
And I didn't even know that Eugene was fired. When he was fired, I didn't even know until they got home. And I was like, wait, why is Eugene here? And they're like, oh, he was fired too. And I was like, why? Because he has the same face? Which actually, yes, yeah, that's the
actually,
answer.
yes, that's the reason. So
there you go.
So tell me one other thing before we go to audience questions, unless Kate has others. What are your plans for the future? I mean, you have this now platform. People care what you have to say about things. What are you going to do with it?
I'm not going to try to make national security policy. So I want to
stick with the hobbyist thing.
Yeah, I am going to stick with the hobbyist thing. But I would most love to do something meaningful with military spouses and advocate for military spouses. I mean, you articulated it very well. A lot of the challenges that military spouses face. And there's a lot of people who, complain that at a certain rank, people get to the DC area and they want to stay here. Well, I mean, a lot of that is their children are older and the spouses are like, I'm kind of done moving around for 15, 17 years. And it's my time. I would like to get a job. I would like to do something. So it's just, this is a place where people, a lot of people end up, and then there's a lot of opportunity here. So, but I would really like to work in that space, and I would like to use my voice in any way I can to represent. I also fall into the suburban women demographic, and I would like to continue to have discussions, find places where people find places where there are similarities, where we can, people can find something to talk. They can find common ground. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. I did a podcast that aired. It was posted yesterday, and I said, one of the things that I learned early when I was 24 and I moved to Israel, I learned that people are more alike than they are different. And I learned this in Gaza, of all places, because I realized that the Gazans who, at that point, the Gazans could wake up at like 4:00 in the morning and cross the border and go work in Israel. And I realized that they wanted the same things: to provide for their families, to, have safety and security. And maybe they disagree on, the finer points and how to execute that in some ways. But the desire is, as I've traveled around the world, I see that people are more alike than different. And I think we can always find common ground. And I would like to work somewhere in that space that people can open a dialogue and find out where we can work together.
Can I also just say that you seem to have like a really great handle on like the many parts of kind of what's been hard about everything that you've been through from this administration, but there seems to be like an increasing number of people, especially from Trump, and that have like lost their place in public service because of him or because of things that happened or like people that worked for him. This is not to tell you at all what to do, but I would think you would also be like, beyond military spouses, you would have a lot to tell people who have like, I don't know, a lot to say to like a support group or some. I've long thought that there needs to be like kind of a support group for people who become involuntary public figures for like the wrong reasons. And they have the same kind of, I only know this because I spend a lot of time researching public shaming and online shaming. And so, like they almost universally have a lot of the same experience, and some of this then use the same language. And I just feel like, but also are going through a period where they just don't feel like they can trust or talk to anyone. And I don't know. I just think I've thought for some time that it would just be so great if someone started a group that could support people who have like been through some type of involuntary public shaming for the wrong reasons. I don't know.
Well, I completely agree with you. I'll tell you that one of the worst times was the weekend after Alex's closed door testimony. And the president flew to New York. And as he was getting on Marine One, he made a comment about Alex and was one of his famous "we'll see." And, even though I knew there was nothing that they could see, nothing that they could say, because I know this man and I know who he is. But when the president of the United States says, "we'll see," I mean, you could make something up. And then there were some people that were starting to say things and they were lies. And, Alex would never say this, but there was a retired lieutenant colonel who made some really nasty allegations, and it was on Twitter, and Don Jr. picked it up and retweeted it. And when Alex had the opportunity to go after him and had the opportunity to really do something, he said, and I was like, yes, we should do it. We should definitely do it. And Alex said, no, he's a veteran. He served. He's retired. And, there might be something else going on. It doesn't matter. It's not true. And I don't want to pursue it. He's a kinder person than I am. But, I believe that. But that day, when people are saying things, but you don't have the opportunity to say anything back, and then it just gains massive traction and you don't have a voice. Here we are, he's an active duty Army officer. Who am I? No one. I mean, no one's going to want to listen to us. And we knew there was more testimony coming, and you're just sitting there and it's awful. And what I mostly thought of once I kind of got my wits about me was children who are bullied online, or teenagers, adolescents, and they don't have the perspective. Like, I'm 47 now, so I was 46, 45 then. I mean, I knew like, whatever, I knew it wasn't true.
You knew it would probably get better. It wasn't forever. But if you're 12 years old and you don't know anything except 6 years of conscious life and memory, then it feels like everything. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
No, I think that's exactly true. I remember, my parents talking to me, a very long time ago about my parents were both worked in education as well, and they talked about suicide, and I think my dad's saying it's a permanent end to a temporary problem, but you don't know problems are temporary when you're a teenager. You don't understand that. You don't understand that life is, there's ups and downs, there's all kinds of things, and you will get through it. You will always get through it. But they don't have the perspective to know that. And that is something, that's another, area that I wouldn't mind working in, or, doing some work in it at some point, because it's something I experienced, and you can go to a very low place very, very quickly.
I really think we should talk maybe offline, but this is something I've been trying to get Lisa to maybe think about, or other people to think about.
Great,
just
yeah.
kind of I was like, God, if we could have just had all some type of support group for people. It just it doesn't even matter necessarily the goodness, your inherent goodness or wrongness. It matters the disproportionality of your public exposure and shaming to whatever it is you're accused of doing or did or whatever else. And that is the thing that is I feel like any type of group, irrespective of politics, would be able to kind of help people cope with. Anyways, just saying, maybe you don't realize it, but I think that might be in your toolkit, and it would be something I just could see you being tremendous at, just from talking to you for a few minutes. Anyone that can just open their heart to going to Israel, and then open their heart to the FAA and the same.
It's very disconnected.
Very disconnected. It means you're a very open person. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. It is something that you read about and you hear about it, but then when you live it, it's completely, that you see how very damaging and scary it is.
Richard Wattenbarger, the floor is yours.
Hello.
Hi.
First of all, I have to say you have one of the best Twitter feeds. And
thank you.
Really, I enjoy, your great wit, and you are like the perfect person to be on Twitter. So, I mean that as a compliment, right? So,
thank you.
What I was curious about, I know that moving around a lot makes it difficult to establish a circle of friends in new locales. And so I was curious as to whether you and your extended family had something of an informal support network of friends to when you were going, since you've been going through all of this, and just right there in the DC area.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two of my dearest friends. We have the DC's smallest book club of 3 people, and on the day after Alex told me on a Thursday night, "Oh, did you hear anything about the whistleblower?" And I was like, "Oh, vaguely, but I didn't, I heard it on NPR, but I didn't pay much attention to it." And then he was like, "Yeah, so tomorrow, could you check on my professional liability insurance?" And then he just turned over and went to sleep. So I didn't sleep that night. And I remember calling my friends the next day, and then we were not on WhatsApp, but then we were. And so we have a very, our WhatsApp group, and they're just my dearest friends. They're both military spouses as well. They both lived overseas, and they have, very unique perspective. So they're, wonderful. Obviously, Cindy and Eugene, my, brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and then, my neighbors have been wonderful. I mean, the support system has been absolutely fabulous. And one of my brothers in Oklahoma who voted for Donald Trump, and he called me. He's a very, very nice, kind person, and he called me just very contrite, not contrite, just very apologetic, and realized part of what people have been saying to them when they knew when they made the connection that I was his sister, and a realization of what we were going through as well. And I think a lot of people close to us, everything affected their view of the political situation in the landscape. They saw things in a completely different way, and particularly people in Oklahoma, which is all Trump all the time, or at least it was at that point.
So I'm actually fascinated by that because I have a friend who went through a version of this and has a lot of Trump voting relatives who did not respond that way.
I have those too.
I'm curious what distinguishes the people who this causes a reevaluation of where they were politically from those who are close to you who it does not, and says, hey, if the president is saying this about my cousin-in-law Alex Vindman, it must be true. Like what's is there a psychological dividing line that you can identify?
Probably. I mean, maybe how close people were to us. For my brother, he knows that. I mean, he just knows Alex and he loves Alex, and he knows that all the stuff they were saying just simply wasn't true. It didn't hold water. So you have two choices. You can either believe the Republican narrative in order to maintain the beliefs that to reconcile what you want to believe with that allows you to not have to examine your beliefs, okay, that you not challenge them. Or
it's easier and more comfortable. You just go with the flow.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the only choice there is to say, well, I guess I didn't know Alex very well. Looks like he wasn't the person that we thought he was. And then you have the people that say, no, that just doesn't make sense. That's not, it can't be true. Both these things cannot be true. And I know Alex more than I know Donald Trump, or, so therefore this has to be true. It has to be, I have to believe Alex. And, there were definitely people on each side. And just recently I have a brother that lives in LA, and we were there. My other brother was there, and we're just sitting around the pool. And I remember my sister-in-law who lives in Oklahoma told me, yeah, I mean, I had friends that said to me, well, is there any chance that Alex is a double agent or a spy? And I was like, well, what did you say? I mean, and again, my brother and sister-in-law are everyone's a nicer person than me. I'm sorry if I've given anyone the impression that I'm a very kind and considerate, but
you're a nicer person than I am, because you mentioned an anonymous lieutenant colonel, and I outed Jim Hickman in the chat.
Okay.
and I'm now doing it out loud. So
okay, I couldn't remember his name. So no, I mean, you're right. I mean,
that's even better. Please forget him and never look back.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I guess that's the difference. And then the people who were most close to us, no question at all. I mean, even people that I knew supported Trump. But even, I would say, I'm from Edmond, which is just north of Oklahoma City. So very suburban. Now, Trump did win that area, but that area is still where they really got people, and where they still have a foothold is the fear and that kind of thing. But in a recent, election, like local elections, the Trump people did not win, when there was, more of not a Joe Biden type figure, but, someone that was, if it was two Republicans. In fact, in the representative race, there were two Republicans running together, a runoff between the two of them. And the person who was, running on, I'll protect Trump, and, this other person is not going to protect Trump as much as I will, she didn't win. So I do think Trump was not the thing. What got them was this nonsensical fear, just stupidity. This, they're going to take away our churches. They're going to take away who knows what. But that's what was compelling to them.
Would you ever consider running for office yourself?
No, probably not. I don't even want Alex to ever work in government again. Sorry, everyone who.
No,
I know everyone says.
I think that's a very reasonable reaction, actually. I think that's totally reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, anything more than what he did would be a much more political position. I mean, political, and that it would be a political appointee. And guys, I'm just done. I'm just way, way, way done with that. So,
Christopher Argerous, you are emerging from the gloaming with
Yeah.
your question.
Thank you. It's great to have you on, Rachel.
Thank you.
So you basically covered my initial question, which was about what was the toughest moment for you. But so I sort of want to retool that and say that military spouse is sort of an inadequate term for all of the official and unofficial duties that families in the military have to deal with. So what was your kind of Rubicon moment when you sort of realized that you were now kind of a public, your family was like public figures, and that was sort of both a chance for people to attack you guys, but also a moment for you to have a public voice to sort of speak out. And I'm especially interested in sort of like this idea that the military has always been nonpartisan, but the sense that to support the troops is like Republicans support the troops and like up to the point that that their president is attacked.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of like the future of
Yeah.
of this idea that you have a voice now to be able to speak out, but also sort of combat this idea that the military is necessarily like a one party when it's supposed to be, you know, nonpartisan.
Well, a couple of things. So in deciding to do the Vote by Lincoln Project ad, there was a moment when Jeffrey Goldberg I'm sorry, is that his Jeff? Yeah. Okay. So he got death threats over the Suckers and Losers article for The Atlantic. And I think at that point I was like, I'm done. I'm out. I mean, I said, that's it. Someone needs to speak up, because he didn't want to speak up because he was a journalist and he didn't want to be part of the story, but he was part of the story. And this is how I feel about the military as well. The military didn't want to be part of the story, but when you're made part of the story and you're playing by a set of rules and one paradigm, but everyone else is playing by a separate set of rules, it's, asymmetric warfare. They're always going to win because they're willing to do anything and draw anything into the discussion, but everyone else has to be hands off. So the media, the military, and they're not free to speak, to say their side of it. And that really frustrated me. So that was when, my idea was actually just to, film myself sitting in my favorite chair and, do like some sort of Instagram video, but it got to be a little bit more than that. But that was my initial conception. And then, in terms of the military, at the Lafayette Park, when General Milley walked over there in his uniform, I will believe him when he says that he had no idea, and later he did apologize. The issue I have with General Milley is, if that was hard for him as a 4-star general and the commander or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, then how do you think it was for a lieutenant colonel and his family? If that was difficult for you to navigate with your house behind security, a separate set of security already on, one of the closely guarded on Fort Myer, which is, heavily fortified base in Arlington, then how do you think it was for us? So that is why I go after them hard. And again, I've lightened up a little bit, but if it was hard for him, then how do you think it was for other people who were made public figures? Alex never sought this out. It is 100% true that he thought in going to the leadership or the legal leadership that they would the legal, as I say, the legal leadership at the NSC, that they would just tell the president, oh yeah, so the thing is, you can't really do that. So you might want to, in the future, maybe not try to extort foreign leaders. And I think he just kind of thought he'd do that and he'd go back to work, and that didn't happen. So the military can be nonpartisan, but they shouldn't allow them that aspect of them being nonpartisan to then be exploited. And it was very much exploited by the Trump administration. And there are other things that go into the factor. I mean, once you reach 2 stars, you're guaranteed, pretty much a place, a very lucrative position in the military industrial complex. And, we could go down that road, but we won't. So that's how I answer that question.
Mary, you are a dark rectangle. We cannot see you, but the floor is yours.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. It's been really inspiring and moving to hear you talk, Rachel, and to hear you talk so personally and honestly about something that is just so hard to imagine. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about the most important sources of support and strength, and also just plain old distraction for how you got through this individually and as a family.
Well, it was challenging, but fundamentally, we are who we are. We haven't changed that. So Alex is a tremendously fun and goofy person. He, one of my neighbors wrote a beautiful Facebook post about him. And, he's just the guy that's out playing with the neighborhood kids and helping them build something out of scrap wood that all the moms are like, he's the fun one, not the safety one, remember? And, he never changed that. I mean, even, when he was stressed, he's pretty good at compartmentalizing. And we had a long journey to be parents. It's the most important thing for us. And we just didn't want that to define, our daughter and her experience. So we tried to keep that as much as possible outside of our home. But, last year, I think in March, he put together a 3,000 piece puzzle. So that was a way that he kind of occupied himself. It was horrible. It was like ancient map. It was a very difficult puzzle. And we have our friends and family who know who we are. It's been a tremendous opportunity to live down the street from his brother and to have them so close, especially, during quarantine. It was, we could isolate with them, but our neighbors also got to know us, they also knew us really well. They knew who we are, and they were tremendously supportive. So, life takes you a lot of places, but, there's people there, and they should, eventually you just make friends, and those friends, become family when you don't live near family. And of course, I heard from, a lot of old friends, some who I know, who were certainly more Republican, but again, they know who I am, they know who Alex is, and they were very supportive of us. And that meant a lot to me too. Even if, I thought they were maybe going to still vote for Donald Trump, they knew that we weren't lying or compromised. And yeah, those are, our family and our synagogue, are just our main, I shouldn't leave out our synagogue. We have a lovely synagogue, that family that's been tremendously supportive as well.
Alice Lee, and I forget the puppy's name.
Oh, this is Rosie. She's actually not a common recurring character because
no, but she was on once around Christmas, as I recall.
Oh yeah.
When you were at your parents' house.
Yeah, I'm dog sitting while they're on a little vacation.
Nice.
Tape, so.
You get the last question today.
Okay, so you guys kind of started this conversation, and I would be interested to hear a little bit more of the kind of experience that you and Kate have both had of being part of a career, or one part of, as Kate was saying, academia and the military have sort of a similar, like, you kind of get pulled everywhere by one partner's job. And I was wondering, and so was Joe Man, whether whether you think that like the new switch to a lot of online stuff will make that easier. And then kind of a much harder question to answer, do either of you see any change? Because I think the exception is a man kind of following a woman's career. Do you think that that's on?
Oh, you mean me? Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that one of our good friends, she just was made a 1-star general in the National Guard, and her husband, they do want to move, but she was given a wonderful opportunity. So she's an attorney, JAG officer in the National Guard. And, so it's not, I mean, it's certainly mostly the case, but it's not always the case. And, he's found jobs around here. I mean, he's also an attorney. It's not difficult as an attorney to find a job in DC, but I am hopeful that, we've entered a time when some of the changes are going to be easier for anyone that people can work from, that we're innovating, and we can see that you don't have to go into an office every day to be able to do a job, and you can work from a lot of different places. The government actually has, done that for a long time. And I hope that they will continue. It's generally a case where people might have lived here and then they moved, and then they allow them to telework, but it's not unheard of. But I hope that the wider, world can see that as well. And, I've talked to friends. I think that is definitely the case. I think people are seeing that, and companies are seeing how much they can save in commercial real estate costs. But so Kate, do you?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So I would say that when I met my partner, we've been together for like 13 years now, which people in the show know, but he was in grad school and I was just a journalist, and like we were both just so young and like starting our careers, and there was no discussion about like who is going to be the lead career or whatever. But then I guess probably around 2012, when I got my 2 clerkships and then transitioned into a PhD program, it started to be pretty clear that we were going to end up, he had ended up kind of settling into software programming, which was fairly movable, kind of a little bit like being an elementary school teacher or like doing something like that. Like it was like, he could find a new school to do it at, he could find a new place to program from, or keep his job and program remotely. And so the real thing became like kind of, where we were going to settle, and, if he would, how we would split time if he didn't really want to be there and everything else, and starting a family. I don't know. We're still in the process of figuring it out. All the questions that Alex said at the back, like about what's going to make you happy, how you're going to structure your life, what do you want to do? Do you want to be an academic? Do you really want to be an academic? Do you want to go to a think tank? Do you, all of these things, I think they're a little abstract until you try them all out and figure it out and start going for one or the other of them. And then I would say that I'm just starting to figure it out, and we're just starting to figure it out. But there was briefly, for a moment, weirdly in the pandemic, this sense of freedom with remote teaching, in which like, it's not like we hate being in New York. That's actually where we prefer to be. But all of a sudden there was like, we could go anywhere for this year. Like we could go anywhere for like the next like 9 months, and you're working remotely and I'm working remotely, and we can do what we want. And so that's kind of like, I don't know. I would actually like, you said that you're kind of looking forward to it. It's a little scary, but it is also super fun. And I don't know, it's also a lot of pressure being the one, breadwinning aside and money aside, it's a lot of pressure to be like the one with like the kind of the constantly in the spotlight kind of career. I don't know. It's like exhausting. I don't know. Maybe just switch off. You seem like you're willing to do it. You'd be great at it.
So I was wrong. Just as I had despaired of Ox Joman ever showing up on the screen, up he popped, so he gets the last question tonight.
My question was similar to Alice's, but yeah, it's basically about the two-body problem as it's known in academia. Hadn't really thought of it sort of from the military perspective, but that's a really useful and interesting perspective, so thank you for that. But yeah, I'm just curious, and you might have already covered it, like what you think the trend towards remote work might help or impact or hurt some of these, dual career families with the two body problems sort of situation.
So the only other issue in the military would be for some of the younger military members, they might have spouses who have jobs that are probably just not able to be remote. So typically, if they're getting in when they're 18, 19 years old and they haven't gone to college, a lot take advantage of programs to attend college during. There are programs for military spouses, but in the meantime, it's hard to live on a young enlisted salary. So that
or
might
a
not be
PhD
something.
salary.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. But that being said, those jobs are a little bit more mobile. So when you start talking about more of a career and you're trying to, build a career, that is, I hope that that's something that the military can address. And I will say there has been some discussion I've seen on military Twitter about, I haven't seen hard numbers, but just anecdotal evidence that the military really needs to address this issue. A lot of military bases are not in, they're close to a large population, but they're not quite there. Like, for instance, Fort Lewis is in Tacoma, not Seattle. I mean, it's a pretty built up area, the entire place, but there is the distinction. And, the list goes on and on. Fort Hood is, kind of close to Austin, but it's definitely not Austin. So, I mean, if you're driving it every day, you're not going to want to do that. So these are the kind of issues. The military needs to decide what they want to do if they want to retain, particularly in the officer corps and more senior non-commissioned officers. So it kind of becomes an age divide, I guess, at some point, and they need to decide what they want to do. But, there are still some friends of ours who will say things like, well, the military is a lifestyle. Okay, maybe it is for you, but that's not everyone's decision. So you're willing to do that and make that sacrifice. And hey, great to you. I was too. But that, also, but I didn't graduate from college with, tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, which even 100%. At a state school, even at a state school, that's the situation these days. So it's not a desire of, do I want to work or, I have to, and I have to find something that's going to allow me to pay back these loans. So there's a lot of factors at play. The military is slow to, kind of welcome these changes, but I hope that 2020 at least will give us that is a place to, launch that discussion and find out what are some ways that we can make this work for a lot of people.
We are going to leave it there. Rachel Finman, you're a great American. It's great to see your face and hear your voice.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
This was lovely.
I'm so glad we excised that tumor. That was
coming back.
We will be back tomorrow with Charlie Warzel.
I love Alex's goofiness so much. This is really right after my heart. Yes, I love it. It's so something I would do.
It's just really who he is, and it's oh my gosh. But I think that that it's always very difficult when I hear him, pontificating about policy and different things. I'm like, oh wow, Alex is really smart. But most of the time, it's a reminder. But that's not the side, as a spouse that I see every day. So
you're just keeping him away from sharp objects.
Yeah, basically, that's a lot of my life is keeping the Ellie and Alex alive. That's providing sustenance, et cetera, et cetera. But again, thank you for having me. This was a pleasure, and it was nice to meet both of you.
I love your Twitter feed too. So
thank you.
Back tomorrow, 22 hours and 55 minutes from now. And until then, we don't have fun anymore, but we do have Alex Vindman rising out of the background and interjecting himself into the conversation. Thank you.
Indeed.